Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting/hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by viewing the Duxbury Government Access channels, Verizon 39 or Comcast 9. Viewers can visit www.pactv.org/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming on Duxbury YouTube, to watch replays and video on demand. So I call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okie dokie. The next order of business is open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for somebody to bring up something that's not on our agenda that they might like to place on a further agenda. And anytime, we're going to go for the board first, but then anytime you get up to speak tonight, if you would give us your name and address, and you do need to go up to the podium to speak. Is anybody on the board, Mike?
Well, I'd like to yield my time to Mr. Reed.
Thank you. I just have one quick thing.
What?
I wanted to congratulate the Duxbury girls hockey team on their 4-0 win over Falmouth yesterday. They are now back-to-back D2 state champions, and we offer our sincerest congratulations to them and their head coach, Dan Najarian. They get a round of applause.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Very smooth move there, Mike. Brian, did you have something?
Yeah, just a few things, Madam Chair. MBTA Advisory Board, I just wanted to give you an update because I know that's kind of a quiet board and we don't have rapid transit or trains in town. But we do participate regularly, and I just wanted to share that the MBTA Advisory Board voted to recommend reduced fares during holidays and weekends on the commuter rail at the behest of my predecessor, Rich Prone, who had been pushing for it for a number of years. He's been off the board for about a year and a half now. They've finally gotten to it, but I did reach out to Rich to congratulate him that his efforts for many years have been recognized here.
Great.
I also want to thank Mr. Guitart, who spoke to my Citizenship in the Community Scout troop last week. He spoke to the troop, the kids about PFAS as well as what citizenship means to him, and they appreciate it very much, as do I. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then finally, at our last meeting, I had told the board that I'd be attending the Bridgewater State College open house on cyber training. I did do that, but I understand Rainey has a more robust update on cyber, so I'll yield to his report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Anybody over here? No? Anybody out?
There's so much yielding.
So much yielding. There are 5 seats in the front, if anybody in the back there wants
We
to
don't
sit
bite.
down. Huh? Nobody wants to sit up front. No, there are seats. Okay. Anybody out there have anything for open forum? No. Okay. Seeing none, that's great. Our new business, the first is a discussion pertaining to the MSBA Statement of Interest regarding the Alden School, and I believe Danielle Kleeman, Dr. Kleeman, will have a presentation for us.
Good evening, everyone. Are you able to put the presentation up on the screen? I believe you have a paper copy of the presentation in front of you. I'll give everyone a second. A lot of pressure.
That's all right. Take your time, Michelle.
It's just a
There it is. There we go. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to return once again with the same request that I did last year. I'm Danielle Klingeman, Superintendent of Schools for Duxbury Public Schools. And I'm here tonight to once again seek approval for the school department to submit a statement of interest to the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Specifically, we're hoping to submit another application to be considered for an MSBA project to enter the pipeline for a potential Alden School building project. I came before you last year as well, and our SOI application was not accepted on our first try, so we're hoping that the second time is a little bit more successful. As you may remember from last year, the Alden School is an aging building. We have different sections of Alden of different ages when you walk around, and some of you that have lived in Duxbury for a long time probably remember the school before it had some of the different additions on it. There's an original section of 1949, an addition in 2002, and there was a windows project through MSBA back in, I think, 2016. So we continue to have many concerns with the Alden School building that have been a challenge to keep up with, that we have been working with the town to do some capital improvement projects. We've had significant roof leaking, and any of you that have kids in Alden would know we have buckets around. We do not like it when we have some windy rainstorms. We've been working to replace the boilers. We have heat concerns on the second and third floors during the warmer months where it's pretty intolerable for the teachers and students to be able to learn effectively when it's really warm heat wave weather. We also have significant humidity on the first floor of the building around the library and that main hallway area, which makes the floor very slippery for students and staff. We have to put a lot of rugs down, and we have tiles that keep lifting. We also have concerns about the entrance in terms of safety and security. When visitors come to Alden School and are buzzed in, they are standing in the lobby of the PAC, and so they aren't in the main area of the Alden School. So another issue we'd like to address with this potential project is changing the entranceway so that it is safe and secure for our students. What's different this year is we're working with a consultant who has experience with recent successful MSBA projects, and so we're hoping that their review of our application and some walkthroughs that we've conducted will allow us to make some necessary changes to be accepted into the pipeline. And so if we go to the next slide, I won't read everything on these slides, but there's information about what exactly is the MSBA. Duxbury is pretty familiar with this project, with this organization, because we've done several projects with school buildings in town. So the MSBA, if you are accepted into the program, this is, the SOI is step one of many, many steps through a process to determine if the community would like to work with them to do a building project. So there's no financial anything financial that's associated with the SOI. It's simply us expressing interest to enter the pipeline, and at that point there would be other building committees formed and opportunities for taxpayers and town residents to vote on the progression through this entire process. Next slide, please. So grants are provided by MSBA, so you have some reimbursement. There's a rate calculation that if you're accepted into the pipeline, they would reimburse part of the cost of a new school building, a new building or a renovation. You don't get to ask them to do just a renovation. When you enter the SOI process, they determine whether they recommend a renovation to your existing building if the infrastructure is sound, or if they would recommend a full rebuild. We're really hopeful that if we are able to enter into this pipeline, that they would see that we have a good infrastructure at Alden School and that that building can be safely renovated. So that's our hope. You can go to the next slide, please. So as I had said at the beginning, that little tiny box in the upper left that's blue is the SOI. And then if you are accepted into the pipeline to go through the MSBA process, you have to go through every single one of those steps on that flow chart there. So this would be the very beginning of a long and many conversations about the future of Alden and how we may do some necessary repair work to that building. You can go to the next slide. In 2022, they added a voting requirement that communities are not able to submit an SOI unless you have school committee and select board approval. And so our school committee did vote to approve this application again for this year. So that's why we are here this evening to discuss this project and have you vote on whether or not you would approve for us to move forward with the SOI application. The applications are due in April, and we would hear probably later in the summer if they wanted to do a site visit. It's a good thing if MSBA reaches out to do a senior site visit to talk more about your project and see your building. So last year when we were waiting to hopefully be contacted by MSBA, and we didn't get that site visit. So we're hopeful that this time through will be the second time's the charm, we hope. There's usually about 100 to 125 schools that are entered into the SOI process each year, and they usually pick about, so there's usually 100 to 125 applications that are put forward, and just a small handful of schools are able to move forward with the SOI. So I think they took about 15 schools for the 2023 year. Next slide. Okay, and so what happens is once we submit the application, they review the submissions. They might ask for accompanying documentation or any building maps or plans that we have. That site visit would take place, and then they would recommend SOIs for invitation into the eligibility period. And I think most districts are notified by December of the same year that the application goes forward. Okay, next slide. This is just a little bit more detail about the process and how long each part takes. And so a full MSBA project from the SOI to completion of a building can be anywhere from 5 to 7 years. And so this is a long, slow process. And so this, as I said, is just the beginning. It's really important to MSBA that towns continue to take good care of the buildings that you're submitting for these projects. They don't want to see communities that have not replaced windows, boilers, whatever, the roof repairs that we've been doing. So it's really important that we have documented efforts to show that we are trying to take good care of our building in order to make sure that it's a safe place for learning for our students. But when we go through this process, we need to express to the MSBA what challenges we have with the building itself that are impeding our students' learning. So when we have classes that sometimes have to leave the 3rd floor of Alden because it's too hot to go outside to find shady areas or to find cooler classrooms, that is an interruption to the learning process. Another factor that they take into consideration is overcrowding. And so when you think about the Alden cafeteria and the fact that we have about 200 students per lunch period that are in that smaller Alden school cafeteria space, that's another area that we would say not an ideal size cafeteria for the number of students that we have in that building. And I think, is there one more slide? Oops. So the slide deck, which I can share with you, has links to MSBA if you wanted more information, but that's all I have tonight. And if you had any other questions, if something that we talked about last year, or if I can share more information.
First, my only question that I have is that nothing's really changed since last year, except the fact that you weren't accepted, we weren't accepted, and so we're doing it again.
Yep, the only thing that's changed is we are working with a consultant. At this point, last year we did our application on our own. But I was pleased to see, in comparison to some SOIs that were submitted and accepted, I asked colleagues if I could see their SOI that was accepted for elementary schools, and ours was very similar. I don't think ours was really lacking, but when we did the walkthrough the other day with the consultant, he was able to give us some advice of additional areas that we could share that have been a challenge at Alden School.
Okay, great. Amy?
I have a quick question. So I'm sure there's a cost involved with utilizing the consultant. I don't know if there's a cost involved in the application process for this. But what happens if you go through the process, you spend the money, and it comes back that they want to tear down the building and replace it as opposed to renovate it, and that would may be in conflict with what the townspeople want? What would that make this whole effort an effort in futility?
So it's a good question. I think that's why there's so many steps to the process and so many votes along the way. There's no cost. There was a small cost for the consultant, which we determined was going to make a big difference for us. As we, there's really no cost until we get to the phase where if we continue to move forward, the town would need to agree to do a feasibility study that would be approved through the MSBA, and that needs to go to town meeting for a vote. And so feasibility studies are, like everything else, we're seeing a big rise in cost of how much it's costing districts to do these. Could cost anywhere from $1.5 to $2.5 million for a feasibility study. And so that is part of the process where we'd have to continue to come forward before all of our town committees and boards to just talk about what the next steps might be. We can also consider, we would not have to do anything if they said you need to rip the building down. We would obviously, if there were structural concerns, we would need to immediately address that as a community anyway. But we wouldn't have to do anything that we weren't in agreement with in terms of a renovation or a rebuild recommendation. We would have the option as a community to not go through MSBA because of the length of time it takes to go through this process. The cost for the community to fund a full renovation of the building now might end up being more cost effective than waiting 6 years down the road with inflation and only getting reimbursed about 30% of the cost by MSBA. And so I think over the next year or so, we're hoping to bring some of these options forward to the community so we can make a choice about, is it more fiscally responsible for us to make a plan for phased-in renovations of Alden, or to continue to move forward with MSBA. So I just think there's a lot of conversations along the way. A building committee would need to be formed so that there would be communication about what the options are and what would be smartest for our community and for the space that we have.
Thank you.
Fernando.
Yeah, our Complete Streets grant application was turned down. That's the sidewalk in Washington Street. But we met today with the grant administrator with the Department of Transport, and so we got good feedback as to what we could do to improve our application. And they increase the chance of getting this grant, right? Is that something that you've done with the MSBA to understand what was missing in ours and what we could do better to be more competitive in applying for this?
They don't give you feedback about what was lacking. You just do not hear from them.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so that's why we reached out to someone that had just completed a pretty large building project in the state and asked if they ever work with school districts to be able to review our SOI and to give us some feedback. And that's why I reached out to another superintendent who was accepted into the pipeline last year, because I wanted to know what was different about their application than ours. And I think that the main issue was that we don't have classroom overcrowding. And that school department, that was their main issue, is that they had modular classrooms that had been in use. But other than that, I think if we can get someone to come and do that senior site visit, we'd be able to really point out some of the challenges in our building that sometimes don't come across on paper.
Okay, great, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Just briefly, this board recently approved ARPA funding for security measures, and I presume that that's not going to be affected at all by this proposal. In other words, we're still going to go forward with those necessary improvements, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have no questions.
Is anybody in the audience that has a question for Danielle regarding this? No? Okay, well, seeing none, do you want to do a motion, Amy?
Sure. I move that the Select Board authorize the Superintendent of Duxbury Public Schools to submit a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All of you standing in the back, I see 4 seats right here. There's 3 seats like in the middle there. You know, you don't have to.
You're
I
making
think
us all really uncomfortable.
Dr. Klingeman's leaving and her, yep, so there's 3 seats there. I mean, we
Look,
have,
there's a whole section now.
I now see 7 seats right in front of me. But if you like to stand up, I guess you can do that too. All right. All righty, let's see. Next on our agenda is a discussion pertaining to the Southern Plymouth County Public Health Excellence Collaborative intermunicipal agreement for the Public Health Excellence for Shared Services Grant. Whew.
It's a mouthful.
Thank you very much. And are you Lauren?
Yes,
Lauren
good
Hachey.
evening,
So Lauren
Madam
Hachey
Chair.
and Tracy Mayo are going to present this for us. Thank you.
So, good evening, Lauren Hachey, the Assistant Health Agent in town, and Tracy Mayo, Health Agent. This evening, we are seeking your approval and hopefully endorsement into entering into an intermunicipal agreement with the 5 other towns that make up this Public Health Excellence Collaborative. Next slide. So we just wanted to give a little bit of background of how we got here. And I don't have to read all of it, but in 2016, the state did an overhaul to look at health systems and try to evaluate effectiveness and efficiency. They created another acronym, the Special Commission on Local and Regional Public Health, and it recommended a number of Massachusetts local boards of health utilize cross-jurisdictional services or shared services. And then in 2019, they released their blueprint for public health excellence, and that outlines recommendations for improving local public health services across the Commonwealth. So the blueprint for public health excellence, it's a comprehensive plan designed to enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of local public health services. And it provides guidelines and recommendations. And some of the key aspects covered in the blueprint include workforce credentials, training, standards, professional development opportunities, and workforce diversity. And so in the next slide, it just lists what is now becoming the standard as of 2023, what's required of health agents, health inspectors, and sanitarians, and that's a list of all different certifications and the time frame to obtain those. So the grant cross-jurisdictional sharing arrangements began to be funded in fiscal year 21. The state was promoting pooling resources, functions, and expertise, a consortium of cities and towns, especially those that are smaller or less prosperous, so they can improve compliance with their statutory and regulatory mandates. So the Southern Plymouth County Public Health Collaborative was formed between Carver, Kingston, Plimpton, Plymouth, and Wareham in May of 2022, and then Duxbury was asked and voted in to join in December of 2022. And with Duxbury joining, our level funding was up to $510,603.84, and that's annually through 2035, and with a 5-year extension thereafter. So some of the benefits for joining this collaborative, we were able to purchase an iPad and Food Code Pro restaurant and food inspection software, which allows us to be a lot more efficient and paperless. The grant funds also enabled 4 out of the 6 towns in the collaborative to hire the Cape Cod Tobacco Collaborative to conduct compliance checks, which are things, compliance checks aren't able to be conducted by Tracy or I. It entails going in with a minor who's attempting to buy tobacco products underage. And so in 2011, this same collaborative dropped a lot of these smaller towns because it wasn't equitable for them. And so when the state did their audit, when we put together these collaboratives, that was the biggest area that our group of 6 towns were failing. So this was a huge benefit to all the towns to get picked back up with this tobacco compliance checks. So those are actively being done twice a year. There's a new state mandated fining structure, and so that's another positive. We've also hired a shared public health nurse who is actively working in each of the towns. In Duxbury, she works at the senior center, and she comes twice a month and has a group where she just has casual coffee talks about anything from Lyme disease to sun protection. We've also hired a food inspector who's working in other towns. We don't, some of these resources we don't necessarily need in Duxbury, but some of them we will. So an outreach coordinator, and we're interviewing for an epidemiologist this week, actually. And in the future, we're looking to hire an environmental scientist. And then the other benefit, among many, is that the grant pays for trainings and certifications for existing and new hires. So that means that Tracy and I can continue with our CEUs. They'll pay for our quarterly meetings. They won't pay for travel, but it's a big expense that saves the town now that there's 2 of us that are required to have all these certifications. And that is really it. We feel that the shared services collaborative with our neighboring communities at no expense to the town is extremely beneficial to promoting public health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Fernando?
Yeah, so I'm just a little bit confused. You mentioned a sum of money, right? That you're applying for that grant for that money to be able to form this collaborative. So maybe just explain that there's no cost to the town. I'm just trying to understand those two numbers.
So they came up, the state,
Yep.
came up with a figure based on how many communities are in our grant group.
Right.
So throughout the state, I think 350 out of 351 towns have these collaboratives.
Right.
So we are funded, and we get those funds already.
Okay.
Whatever we don't use does have to go back into the pot. So
Right.
we're trying to think of other ways. It's very strict on what the funding can be used for, and it's to promote these hires to come and work cross-jurisdictionally when needed.
Right. Okay.
So is
I
this,
think I understand.
okay, is this a new agreement that you're presenting to us?
So what was done before when we originally signed on was an MOU, and now they want an
Okay.
IMA signed. So
Okay.
it's really a matter of
Okay.
changing the agreement of how it's signed. KP Law has already reviewed the IMA because they are also town council for
2
2 other towns that are
Okay.
in our group. So it's a matter of the services and the money's is not changing. What's changing is just going from an MOU to an IMA.
Right.
That's really
So
the
you've
difference.
been doing this all along, and now you're just changing that?
Right. So when we started originally, we were able to have Rainey as the town manager sign off and Karen Tepper as the chair of the Board of Health sign off.
Okay,
Now they want it to be an intermunicipal agreement.
got it.
Right.
Okay, Amy?
So it does say here, what I'm concerned about, let me just start with what my concern with some of these grants are, is that, they start out with a grant and they're funding this, and you join in, and then they pull the grant money. And it says right here that this cross-jurisdictional sharing arrangement began in 2021, funded through the state, to promote pooling resources, functions, and expertise, a consortium of cities and towns, especially those that are smaller or less prosperous. So my concern would be that we're not small and we're not less prosperous town, and I'm concerned that after the grant money is discontinued, that we are in a situation where we're paying for a lion's share of services for other communities. Is that a concern?
Yes, that was a concern for all of the towns that are in our group. I can't speak for other groups. So we really wanted to make sure that this IMA didn't have language in there that these communities would have to assume the responsibility of keeping up with this collaborative if and when the money runs out.
Okay, so we can get out as soon as,
We
okay.
could get out anytime.
That's in the agreement.
And the other thing is that this isn't regionalizing us. Our own boards of health will keep our autonomy. We're not looking to do that. This is just to sort of pool resources and help out. There's some communities, I can say all 6 of these towns, all of their health departments, the only person that has their RS is Tracy. So they're trying to really promote getting qualified people in these positions that can that are qualified to do these inspections, and but we're not bound by this, and that was a big concern for all of us, and that's why we definitely brought in our own town council to review everything.
Brian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the good fortune of being this board's liaison to the Board of Health. And I first just want to acknowledge Tracy and Lauren. We have tremendous professionals on staff here in town already. And I know with COVID in the rearview mirror, we're not thinking about health updates every day like we did in the past, but we still have great professionals working in the background every day to keep us safe. And we have a tremendous Board of Health as well. I know we don't see them all the time, but I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge them. One question on the IMA itself. In the scope of services, there's a whole list, and Lauren, you made reference to the various specialties that we might be able to avail ourselves of. One of them is a social worker, and in my year up here and seeing the various challenges across town, one thing that's very clear to me now is the need for mental health services for a whole host of reasons, and that this social worker caught my eye in that. And the question is, are we able to put in a request, for lack of a better word, to say, hey, you know, we need social worker services more than we need an epidemiologist, for instance, in the next 12 months?
So when we have these monthly meetings, we discuss these different situations and things that we need and request. Social workers on there, I think what they're trying to change it is to community outreach, only because of the problem with trying to maybe get somebody with the degrees and things like of that nature at this point as a part-time person. But yes, that is one of the things that we wanted, is one of our priorities, to deal with certain cases that we have in town that we have to deal with, that we are not mental health professionals, and they would benefit from that. So that definitely is one of the services that caught our eye when we decided to join this.
Great, yeah, because that would be top of my list of things that we don't have
Right,
in-house
and
that we could definitely take advantage
as well
of.
as an environmental scientist. And the reason we wanted that was to deal with PFAS and also with Holtec, and that's kind of why we're with the Plymouth and Kingston group, is because of the Holtec situation. And so that's how we got involved with that group versus like Marshfield and Pembroke and things like that.
Great.
So.
Thanks for your leadership on the IMA. That's great.
So, can I just a follow-up question then, right? So, is that okay? So essentially, the support that you're getting, we're being funded, the corporate's being funded $510,000 a year through 2035 with a 5-year extension afterwards. So all this is getting paid for. So maybe your question, Amy, is once this finishes, then there may be some resources we may want to still have access to. So there could be a cost later on. Anyway, just to bear that in mind. Okay?
Right,
All right.
but it's not something we're required to continue.
No, not required to.
But it may be, like you said, something that comes up that is needed.
As needed, that we recognize as a town and we'd be good to pay for. Okay?
All
Thank
right.
you.
Is there any questions from the audience? No? Oh, if you do, you're up to the podium. Thank you. Your name and address?
Bonnie Cody, 54 Harrison Street. I just have a question in that everything I read, you say it's not regional, it says it's regional, and it just appears to me that we're being offered money and there has to be strings attached.
Usually.
I think we're losing our voice. I think we're going to lose all of our local control and decision-making. And there's a lot about compliance. It's in all of the documentation, and especially in the SAFE bill, which this piggybacks onto. You will be evaluated constantly. You will be expected to report to regional leaders, and you will be held compliant. You have to be compliant, or your funding will be removed, and I don't know what else.
Okay.
But I just don't understand why the state can't put together such, because it's wonderful resources, and just offer guidance. Why do they have to pay towns to get in to sign something and to commit.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I think maybe
Tracy?
Tracy could answer that question
Interesting
for us.
question.
So we already have mandates and things we're required to do. The problem is with one person that works at a department with all of the areas that we cover, it's very difficult to do that. Some communities have a person that only works half-time. That's it. So, and I can see your concern with that, but we already have things we're required to do, and we have to report to the state already on those items. So,
From what I understood from a few minutes ago, if you are uncomfortable or we're uncomfortable with it at any point, we can
Correct.
step out.
correct. Right.
And to be clear, Madam Chair, this adds resources, things that we don't currently have. It doesn't require Lauren or Tracy, for example, to go do inspections in other towns.
No, no.
So it's not taking away from our
It's helping
our
us with
resources.
things that we can't have. The main thing for us is like the tobacco control. We don't have that now. And we have found since they've had the inspections that there have been people in violations of that. So, you know, it's areas that we can't cover because we don't have the ability to do that.
Thank
What
you.
about the compliance part of that question? I mean, I too am always looking for the strings. I feel like, there's no free lunch in life, so if you're getting one, you better be careful.
Well, I mean, as a group, you have to report your budget. You have to provide the information of what's being done with the monies that you're using. So that is what the grant committee does when we go to these monthly meetings. They have a person that is in charge of doing that is hired through the grant committee to make sure the money is being spent properly and does the budget as needed.
And Plymouth is the lead town on this,
They
as
are.
I recall, right, under the IMA, and they collect a 15% management fee, for lack of a better term.
They do.
So,
They have, it's an employee of Plymouth now.
yeah, so.
They're the financial
Point being, for the
responsible party.
admin type stuff, that's first on Plymouth for that. They get paid basically to do that
Right.
work.
that-
Well, there's one
we-
way they can give back a little bit, just saying.
Now. All right, anybody else in the audience? Okay. Shall we vote?
Sure. You ready for a motion?
Yep.
I move that the Select Board support and endorse the intermunicipal agreement as presented and authorize Cindy Ladd Fiorini to execute as Select Board Chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lauren and
Thank you.
Thank
Tracy.
you.
Appreciate it. So the next discussion is on the Town of Duxbury Shellfish Aquaculture Grant Regulations Grant Program. Do we have someone, Joseph Messina? First row volunteer.
First
Thank you
row
very much,
volunteer.
by the way, for that. You were very brave.
Yeah.
We have plenty of seats in the front row.
There are so many seats. Come sit down.
Hi, I'm Joe Messina. I'm the chairman of the Bay Management Commission in Duxbury. Your first question probably is, what is the Bay Management Commission? So I'll address that briefly. It was formed initially out of the PASS study group, which looked into piers, back when piers were a larger issue before they were as regulated as they are. That became the Bay Management Commission, which is now 9 members, all who have different expertise and constituencies that really serve as an advisory board to really the harbor master and the Board of Selectmen. So the commission has no jurisdiction to do anything other than answer questions and inquiries posed to it by people in the town or the Board of Selectmen when they want things addressed. And that's a pretty broad group of people. There are folks who are scientists, doctors, lawyers, shell fishermen, boatyard operators, just regular sports people, people who sail, people who row, people from the Maritime School, people from the Yacht Club. So really what you get is you get like a broad brush of the different ideas and constituencies, each who can be heard, and try to reach a balance of what the regulations are and respond to questions by the board. We do things like look at the mooring regulations periodically, have tried to keep that moving as that becomes a tighter resource, and often asked to look at questions related to aquaculture in Duxbury as a, I guess, non-aligned body, because it's not the Shellfish Advisory Commission, which isn't aligned either, but it's a second voice on that. So and there's a couple things on the agenda. One of the things we were asked to talk about was the aquaculture moratorium, and really some of the original questions we got through Fernando, and thank him for sort of revitalizing the committee. Was the question, what was the moratorium? What is it? Why do we have it? Moratorium sort of denotes a temporary pause. It has been in place since 2006, which doesn't seem very temporary. So the idea was that in 2005, the industry was fairly new and was growing, and there were lots of people applying for licenses to farm shellfish in Duxbury. And the board at the time put the moratorium in place to take a pause so that the town could study the impacts of it, whether the bay itself could support additional aquaculture, and importantly, the various conflicts of the various uses in the bay, and to try to reach some sort of a balance on that. That was in 2005 and 6. The recommendation was to keep it in place until the town came up with a aquaculture management plan. That happened in 2009. We're still just a few years back from today. We'll get there eventually. 2009, the recommendation, which was adopted in that plan, was that ecologically, environmentally, the bay can sustain more aquaculture. But the recommendation was to hold off on lifting the moratorium. And there was a recommendation then for the town to consider a limited entry fishery for aquaculture. And that is something that already exists for wild shellfish licenses. For mussels and razor clams in Duxbury, it's a limited entry fishery. Someone has to leave a license open, and then someone can go to the lottery or then be picked off a wait list for that. And that fixes the number of licenses that are out there to the certain amount. And Jake would know the details of how many of each of those wild fishery licenses there are. A limited entry fishery is something that is done in every town in Massachusetts that has, other than a completely initial start to an aquaculture industry where they haven't done it yet, every town, Wellfleet, Provincetown, everyone with a sort of mature or close to mature industry uses this method to put a limit on how many farms will exist in the town. And the reasons are very similar to the recommendation of the Bay Management Commission and Shellfish Advisory, which is, while the bay probably has, and there's not a definitive study of this, luckily in the town we actually have water quality experts. We've had some help from people who work at Woods Hole. From an ecological standpoint, the bay can support more aquaculture, likely. The question is, can the town tolerate it with all the different uses? And there are increasing and conflicting uses, which is a good thing. People are getting out on the water, but the waiting list for a deep water mooring, I can personally attest to, is 26 years, because I just got through it. There's a waiting list for flats moorings now, which there used to never be. Bayside Marine has no longer capacity to put boats on the rack system. The maritime school programming has increased significantly with sailing, rowing, all are great things, but there's a lot going on out there on a weekend in the summertime. There's also landward use of town infrastructure for aquaculture, boats, trailers, floats. Now the industry itself has not, you can sort of take a snapshot, it's been fixed at 30 licenses since 2006. So that has not increased. We've done things like, people may notice the shacks that are out on moorings in the summertime. That was an effort to move sorting off the land and into the water to minimize the impacts, on the land. From time to time, the regulations have been changed to adopt to things like marking. There's been a long period of people being unhappy with the way oyster grants are are what the buoys look like. We change them, and then people don't like that, they change them back, but they're trying to minimize the amount of impact they have out on the water. So we've evolved to sort of minimize this impact as much as possible of that industry. So the recommendation from Bay Management and also from Shellfish Advisory was to implement a change in the regulation to limit or implement the limited entry fishery, which would simply swap out Section 8, which covered the moratorium that's been invoked, and to implement a limited entry fishery. How these would come up is there are regulatory reasons why people who have a license might lose their license, minimum investment, other non-compliance. Under Chapter 130, aquaculture licenses are transferable. So what has happened with a moratorium in place is that it has essentially worked like a limited entry fishery. People have left the industry and sold and transferred their business to someone else. So someone who has moved in, applied for a transfer to the Board of Selectmen, they have paid for boats, gear, and the animals that are on those farms, and they've purchased that business to continue. And so that has happened over time, so there has been change, but the town has not said, everybody put your names in, let's go put more farms out there. And so that's where we are. So I think it's the Select Board's decision. The Select Board can do nothing about the moratorium, and we can see if we can get to 20 full years of it being in place. It could lift it and open up applications for new farms. What Duxbury does not, some towns will go find places in the bay that they say would be suitable for aquaculture and then offer them up. Duxbury's never done that. They left it to individuals long ago to identify where they might have a farm, do the work with the various regulatory bodies that oversee it, and then come for the license. So the limited entry fishery makes sense. It's not different. It's what was anticipated in 2009 that the town should move to. And it just hasn't, I don't think, because I think, and I referenced this in my submission, Sean Dolan was involved in everything, and it was his town, we just live in it, which I mean kindly. But it was not an issue for the Board of Selectmen that was important. So then that's why we were asked, and that's our recommendation.
Okay.
And this was voted unanimously by the Duxbury Bay Management Commission and the Shellfish Advisory Committee in January, right?
That's right.
All right, so I just want to make sure that I understand the difference, and that everybody understands the difference between limited entry and the moratorium. So limited entry means that if somebody goes out of business for whatever reason, that business could be sold to somebody on the waiting list. No.
So what limited entry means
So-
is we're going to.
Or given to.
Would be that the board makes a decision that says, whoop,
I obviously don't understand.
I think it would go back, it would revert back to the town if it was. right?
say again, I'm sorry?
It would revert back to us in that event.
Right, because the
Yeah.
approval of a transfer is again, it's a licensing request that made to the board. The difference is this: right now, we have regulations that say the board, when it wants to, can impose a moratorium. It's done so. That denotes a temporary pause. So this is a limited industry fishery is to say, we're going to recognize that the town is going to set the limit at 30 licenses that have existed since 2006. It's going to make a decision based on the varying interests of the bay, the different conflicts of uses, where the industry is, and say, we don't need a temporary pause on brand new licenses. We're just going to say that's what they are. That's the
Okay.
ones that exist now.
All right.
Then once the limited entry is in place, there is a waiting list and a lottery for the waiting list. Individual license holders, if they leave the industry and find a buyer, that buyer who's going to pay that consideration can come before the board and say, I'm acquiring Mr. Smith's farm and business, here's why I'm qualified, here's where it is, and then the approval is of the Board of Selectmen to approve that transfer. The other way it would become open is Jake Emerson as the Shellfish Constable. You know, they have to file reports with the town, how much is being invested, what their yield is. If someone's not working the farm or can't find a buyer, that would then go to someone on the wait list to say, from the wait list, would you like to take that license over? And that's thus you have that limited entry.
So if someone's, could sell their farm or lease their equipment and all that sort of stuff to somebody not on the wait list?
Correct. And the license is by statute transferable.
But there's certain criteria, there's a list of criteria.
They have to meet all the
be a
criteria.
Duxbury
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
resident, they
Yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
to be,
They'd have to meet all the
Able and-
criteria for the original license, town resident, et cetera.
Okay,
Existing regulations would remain.
okay. Any questions from the board?
I have a whole list.
You have a
I
whole
think
list.
Mike's got his hand
We'll
up.
go this way this time.
I think part of my question was answered there. So in essence, we're putting a permanent nature to this in practicality form, what was going on with the moratorium. Fixing it at 30 licenses, going forward, and just maybe adding a procedure if there's this hypothetical situation where we could hit the wait list.
Correct, but also permanence denotes the fact that the board can't change the regulation again, if it wanted to. So people could come to the board and say, we think there should be more aquaculture,
Right.
and we can amend the regulations again if that's what the board wished to do. Go to 40, go to 50, open it up. That, it's all the prerogative of the board.
And I saw that there was some open meetings or hearings that you had held. Was there any pushback from any residents or from anybody in the industry about expanding aquaculture or having some kind of keeping this open-ended?
I think there was a sort of realization, at least in the industry, that I would say in the Bay management, the most discussed topic is aquaculture. It's the most regulated activity on the Bay, and it's talked about a lot. And I think there's a recognition that there would not be that expansion of aquaculture to any great degree would meet with resistance. So I think it seemed like a fair compromise to say that moving to what most towns do as a limited entry fishery is kind of the fair thing for the town. There was some questioning about rights of people claiming to own private tide land and whether that applied. And I think the discussion there was that our regulations don't address private tide land versus other places that licenses are necessary at all. So the gist was that that's a separate issue. So if someone wanted to change regulations or enact different regulations to basically say, well, we're not talking about tide land of the Commonwealth, which is referred to in the statute, but private tide land, they could propose something, and that might be a change that the select board was interested in doing.
My final question, have we ever had a situation where someone's abandoned in the moratorium time?
No.
Because, I mean, these are pretty valuable farms, I would assume.
Brian, I'm going to
No.
go.
So the answer is no.
No, and that
Oh,
was one of the things that's discussed is that it's a substantial expense to start from scratch.
Right.
So if one were to start from scratch, it's a lot harder now and a lot more regulated now for someone to go through the business of finding a location, getting the DMF approval, getting everything else approved, buying everything. It's a several $100,000 initial investment. So in some ways, being able to take over someone leaving is an advantage to starting it yourself. Because there's at least been, even if it's not productive, there's been some work done, and you've got a lot of approvals already done in advance from the various entities that have to examine these things before you get all the other licensure.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, can you just take me through one more time, what happens currently under the existing regs? What happens if a license holder wants to move on and do something else? And
Currently or under the
Currently.
proposed,
Currently.
under the current?
So currently, nobody has, I think Jake made the point, no one's forfeited a license. And so what has happened is people have either approached people to say, if whatever circumstances, if you want to retire or leave the business, I will purchase your operation, if you will. And because those are transferable, those two individuals strike a bargain on the value of the livestock, the machinery, whatever else they have. They strike a private deal, that person leaves, they sell the farm, and then they apply to the town to say, I'm a resident of Duxbury, I meet the requirements, and ask for approval by the Board of Selectmen to get the license that allows them to operate that business as part of the transfer between those two private individuals.
And that's how it works now?
That's
Or
how it
That's how
works
it would
now.
work if somebody were to want to sell, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and forgive me, I mean, this is a lot for us to take in, and there were a number of documents, and there were some letters from council that we looked at as well. The difference between the current scenario and the limited entry fishery as it relates to the sale of an existing farm, what's the difference with that again?
None,
Okay.
which was why I meant the comment that it sort of functioned like a limited entry fishery without being one, since there's been a moratorium.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Amy?
So I've been waiting for this conversation for about 4 years, so I really do have a lot of questions, and I apologize, but it's been long in coming.
This is it.
You're on, Amy.
So you mentioned that we have 30 total leases out there.
Licenses.
Licenses. So is each one of those licenses maxed out? I believe you start at 1 acre, and then you have the ability to increase up to 3, is that correct?
Correct.
So how many of the 30
I'm not
are
sure
at
if
the
Jake can
max?
answer this. I think some people are not at 3.
Yeah, so,
Just get a little closer to the mic.
Sorry,
please.
Jake
Don't-
Emerson, Shellfish Constable. There are there's 7 that are not currently at the 3-acre maximum.
There are only 7 of the 30?
Correct.
Oh, okay. And just to keep that in mind, each one of those people, I believe, has the ability to come and ask for additional up to 3.
Yeah,
And
right,
that's-
because our regulations limit it to 3, so they could go to 3.
Right, so I'm just envisioning, part of why I wanted to have this conversation and why this is a long time coming is that we hear a lot of feedback about the competing interests in the Bay. And, I've got some text messages from Holly Morris who, there's a lot of people that want to be a part of this discussion. And that's a little bit, outside of just this moratorium, but I think it's important to understand all of what's going on and what could be going on. So really, under the current scenario, the amount of space that is currently utilized out there for oyster aquaculture could be significantly greater. If only 7 of the 30 licenses are less than their maximum.
It's only a total of about 8-point-something acres that is available to go up. So we're at 81-something acres. So there's a potential of an increase of 8 acres
Okay.
total.
Okay.
The total percentage of Duxbury Bay that's occupied by aquaculture is less than 1%,
That's an
given the
important
size of the
point.
bay.
Less than
Um,
1%.
Less than 1% at high tide or low?
Well, I have to do some quick math. But,
There isn't much bay at low tide, really.
right, but I think the concerns that people raise, and I get the same, I had the same conversation with Holly in the pharmacy, that people do, there are concerns about conflicting uses. I would note, as someone who responds to a lot of those questions, there's a reflex if something is new or interesting on the bay to say that it's aquaculture. So, for example, there's a green crab fishery in Duxbury Bay where some of the rebar that people are seeing, they're saying, oh, I saw rebar, that's the oyster people. That's the crab fishery people who are green crab people who are doing that in the bay. There are other uses of the bay. So I think having the information like you're saying and addressing what people raise questions, people will see in a storm. A lot of those oyster houses are up in Bluefish River. People don't want to look at that because it's They don't want to see it. But it's part of a storm readiness management plan to get, for the safety of the town, to get these things out of the mooring area. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into it. So I think it's a good point to point out that there is a lot of questions and there are a lot of conflicting uses. And anyone who's watched the sailors leave the maritime school while Bayside's pulling the boats out has seen there's a lot going on out there.
There is a lot going on, and I think, again, part of this discussion is to try to get everybody's input on what's going on and how we can best manage all of the interests, because, everybody has a different passion. And, that's the first I've heard about the green crabs, and, there is a concern about those stakes and the people who are rowing or crewing or whatever they call it, and, that can be a danger factor for them. So, okay, I'll move on to my next question. Must we allow the transfer? I know that Massachusetts state law, according to Mr. Brennan, I believe the word says it permits transfers. I'd like to know if we're required to allow for the transfer of a license, or if it could come back. So in other words, once you are, you're not allowed to transfer it yourself, it comes back before this board. Is that an option?
Well, it's the town Board of Selectmen is the licensing authority, though the statute says they are transferable and may be transferred. I do think, if you want to get lawyerly, I think there's a protected liberty interest in the transferability of a license that's granted by statute. So unless there was a good reason in the record why it was not being transferred, there would be arguably an issue with denying it. So, for example, if the ad hoc agenda were, we don't want any more farming in Duxbury, so therefore we're not going to approve transfers, that would probably violate the statute and some other aspects. If it was this applicant who's come forward, does it meet our criteria, or we don't think is qualified for good reason, that scrutiny is something the board should look at.
And I'm not asking,
Yeah.
I'd have no problem denying that. My only intent here is that there is a perception, and I've been approached by people who feel like they're never going to be able to get into the industry, that it's a closed community, because as the question was posed to Jake, that the licenses don't come back to us, they get transferred, so that other people who may want to get on a waiting list or may be interested in doing this simply isn't probably not going to happen for them. So that is the only reason I asked this question, is to try to open the door for other people who may want that opportunity.
The thing is that the farmer has invested money. So by doing that, you're not allowing the farmer to, if he wants to get out, and sell his property and his business and his farm to the highest bidder. What happens if you open up the transfer? Then that person, you're forcing that person to maybe go to a lowest bidder, right? It's the first person on the wait list. You say, well, I'll give you $100,000 for your business, and when he adds it all up, his business is $300,000. So how can you deny the farmer the ability to sell his business for a fair price by forcing him to go to that first person on the wait list?
I'm just posing the question whether we're
Is that the-
required to.
Yeah, and I'd also think what's interesting is
Yeah.
there have been, I believe, 10 transfers. So if we talk about the 30 that existed in 2006, 10 new people are in that business during the moratorium, and those aren't. You can only have one. So there are people who sought those people out, expressed an interest, knew the industry. I think it's helpful to have somebody. I know it looks fun. I don't think everybody thinks it's that fun sometimes.
I think it's
That
a
if
lot of work.
people are, but people who are interested, are talking to people saying, I'd like to get into the business. So 10 people have gotten in, so fully a third has turned over to purchasers. So there is a way in. It's just not given to you by the town versus the private transferability, I guess.
Are
is
you
the way.
allowed to bequeath your lease if you die? What happens then?
I think the family can have it for a year, your spouse can operate it for a year, but it can also hold it in, well, Jake can tell us that.
It's in here.
Thanks,
Jake
Jake.
Emerson, Shellfish Constable. Yes, so there's state statute that allow for that to go to your immediate family for a year or the extent of the current license period, whichever comes.
And would the
Last.
requirement for that person to reside in town still be applicable?
Yes,
Yes.
all applicable town regulations would be applicable to anybody of the surviving immediate family member.
Okay. And I'm getting, we're moving through this quickly, and I appreciate the time. I don't believe I have a lot of problems with this. I think it sounds like the right move, although I'm not 100% sure that we're ready to make this big decision tonight. And one of the reasons is that there's some pretty significant problems in the language of the limited entry fishery. Number 8, your proposed language, first paragraph says, in its sole judgment, the licensing authority has determined that a limited entry fishery is in place, and granting of additional license will not further the purposes of these regulations. I believe that first line actually says exactly what you don't want it to say. I would imagine that you want to further the purposes of the regulations. So I think that they're,
I don't think so.
Council reviewed this. Are we saying that Jeff Blade made a mistake on this?
I believe there's
What you're saying is that
Did
if
you
you
look at this,
grant,
Brian? Can you
Yeah,
read the
I didn't
first
realize
line?
this was reviewed by council.
Was
I
it?
believe that
Yeah.
there's some pretty significant problems in the
Okay,
the
well,
language.
we
I
ought to deduct the bill then.
I think what it's saying, Amy, is that if
As
you,
I read it, in its sole judgment.
Rainey and I read it
licensing
the same.
authority-
Go ahead, go ahead.
In its sole judgment, the licensing authority has determined that a limited entry fishery is in place and granting of additional licenses will not further the purposes of the regulations.
Okay, that is,
Meaning-
that makes sense the way that the inflection there, but there's, should be another word there.
Well, if I sing it, it's gonna be great. No, I would just point out, as Fernando points out, it's not my regulation, it's town council's. I'm
Yeah,
kidding you.
yeah, it needs another word in there to make that
Really?
more clear, because you can read it the other way. You Can't you, Ran?
I did.
Yeah,
I didn't at all. I still don't see how you would read it another way.
Oh, I can. So
Well,
but,
that's the trouble with lawyers. You can interpret the many different ways.
You can.
Just needed a semicolon.
Yeah.
it
Put a
needs
semicolon
some
after place.
punctuation. Brian can probably do it in a second. But I yield, so I'm yielding, I had to do it.
No,
You know,
come
it's
on,
just a trend
Amy,
tonight.
This
We're
is,
yielding.
seriously, 4 years. Have you asked all your questions?
It's incredibly brief
Oh,
for
no,
4 years of questions, so.
Actually, it's really more the use. I understand this now. I understand what you're wanting to do, and I understand, why we might want to do it. What I really am interested in is hearing the residents, hearing the people who are, I go out for an occasional paddleboard. I'm not out on the bay the way that everybody else is. And again, there is a lot of people who have a lot of concerns about those competing interests and making sure that everybody can enjoy the bay. So that's what I'm interested in hearing as well.
And I
Fernando,
would
did you?
offer,
Oh.
the Bay Management Commission is supposed to submit a State of the Bay report. It hasn't done so in a while. That process, I think, could be helpful in having an open forum for people to talk about questions, concerns, understandings, if you
Right.
will, about it. Because right now, unless somebody knows to talk to you, or remembers me when I was on Concom and asked me at Walgreens a question about crab markers, they don't know what's going on, and information is helpful.
Yeah,
And-
we
and-
would like that very much to get that.
We would.
Yeah.
And would the crab markers be something that you'd go to Jake? Are you, who regulates the crab markers?
Stays on the screen there.
Yeah, that's always interesting, because particularly with kelp,
Have to wait.
Kelp
no
is
one knew
right.
that that was unregulatable by the town, but it's a state issue as well.
But if there's a safety issue with how they're conducting their practices, I would think that it would still be a Jake thing. I don't know, Jake, sorry.
Yeah, as long as they fall within their permit, within the size and scope of the actual gear, I can't really regulate too much on that. I can always make friendly recommendations, and that's
Yeah,
what I have done.
I
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't want there to be
Yeah.
dangerous situations for our
Yeah, and if
for our
I do
rowers
have
and-
issues, I can always make those recommendations known to the issuing authority, which is the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I
All right, I think it's-
Holly
yeah, I
Morris
know.
has got, oh, sorry.
I know. So I'm going to open it up to the audience now. So anybody that has anything to say, you'll need to come up to the podium, name and address. But I'm going to start with Holly, who's got her hand raised over there on the wall. Holly?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Holly Morris, 145 Abrams Hill Road. First of all, I just want to say that my name has been mentioned a couple of times.
Sorry, Holly, I didn't know you were here.
Which is great. Thank you. I certainly, I'm very much in favor of aquaculture, and I think it's absolutely essential for this bay as far as developing public awareness of how important our bay is. And I fully support the growers. My only concern, or a couple of concerns I have, is that I think there should be more of a forum where users of the bay can come together and talk about the use of the bay, safety issues, and so forth, because I do a lot of rowing, and I also coach at DBMS. And one of the challenges that we have is tidal and water conditions, wind direction, and velocity. And many times this forces us to come into the shallow waters, and therefore we are right in the vicinity of many of the oyster grants. And also hearing this evening about the green crab sites, that lends tremendous concern about safety and our boats crossing over those grants or hitting things on the bottom and so forth. So I think it's really important that there be also some education so that we know where all these things are on the bay. And I think, certainly there are growers who may not be happy with the rowers, and we would love to hear from them. And the rowers should also have that discussion with the growers as to some of the issues that are out there. And also, as you all have noticed over the years, especially since COVID, the number of boats that are on the bay, especially on the weekends, has increased dramatically. And I think there are a number of people who just do not understand the importance of being considerate of small craft on the water. And I think it comes down to public education. And these are just a couple of things that I wanted to point out. I've been in communication, certainly with Joe and Amy about the white sticks that are out there in the bay that indicate where the seeds are. Sometimes at the end of the season, those sticks they become sharp points. They're like spears out in the water. And they're very difficult to see in the early morning, especially if there's algae growing on them. And if you are in a rowing shell, you may not see these. And we have come across them a number of times, and it has been, I'd have to say, frightening at times. So again, I think there needs to be more discussion. And with that, that's it.
Thank you, Holly. I appreciate it. And I think that, we said a few minutes ago, a forum's a great idea to talk about the uses of the bay and get conversations going between different groups. Is there anybody out here that would like to go ahead? And I see you, Allison. I will get to you.
Good evening, my name is Brendan Cook. I represent CJ Husk at 160, 162 Marshall Street. I just want to raise a limited issue that we've addressed with Duxbury Bay Management on a few occasions now, and that's addressing private property rights under the regulations. So I know Mr. Messina touched on it briefly in that the Duxbury Bay Management Commission feels it can be addressed at a later time, but we feel now is a great time to address it, especially where if you read that proposed regulation, it addresses the wait list and how that's going to be handled going forward. So if you look to a neighboring town like Plymouth, they've implemented regulations specifically addressing private property. And one of those things, among others, is essentially that if you have waterfront property and your private property extends out to the water, you don't have to wait on the wait list to get a hearing before the select board. It doesn't guarantee that you're issued a license, but you are allowed to be heard. So you've heard a little bit about the benefits of aquaculture. There's a lot of ecological benefits, water purification, fish habitats, economic benefits. A lot of the money stays local. And then so you'd get those benefits if you're allowing these applications to be heard, and then granting some down the road, as well as more sites for future tax revenue for the town. And then you don't get the drawbacks with the boat traffic or the mooring congestion, or especially at the boat ramp, because people can access them from their properties. So just a little bit of background. In Massachusetts law, there's essentially a colonial ordinance from 1641 to 47 that granted rights. Massachusetts is unique in this, but your rights go out to the mean low water mark, or 1,650 feet, which is 100 rods in Old English. But as they are currently written and as the proposed regulations are written, there's no addressing private property rights in the regulations themselves, which leaves open questions there that could be subject to challenge on that. And if we're looking at a comprehensive review of this language in the regulations, you saw it took 19 years to get from a moratorium to today. So it might be good to strike while the iron's hot here and introduce some language that just clarifies what private property owners' rights are when it comes to applying for and getting these licenses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allison, did you have your hand up?
I did. Allison Shane, 123 South Station Street. I just wanted to back what Holly was saying. I'm a lifelong sailor and coach at DBMS. And with our tidal flow, when it's low tide, it's a lot of activity on there. So I think it's important to understand all the uses. And I'm glad that the number of farms will not increase. And I think private property should definitely be a conversation that's discussed in further detail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I go ahead? Yeah. So, in just your response to your letter, Mr. Cook, you state that the regulations are silent as to the use of deeded property for agricultural farms, right? You also state in your conclusion that the board, through amending our regulations, should recognize the private rights of property owners and the inapplicability of the regulations to their activity, just as Plymouth has done. That was your conclusion of your letter dated today. Actually, our regulations are not silent at all. I just want to make it explicitly clear that a license is required for agricultural farming, full stop. A license is required for agricultural license, full stop, wherever it occurs. So it's not silent, it's quite explicit in that. And to paraphrase our town council, 1, title land held by a private owner remains subject to the government's power to regulate, just as all other property in the Commonwealth is. Point 2, thus the government can regulate aquaculture uses on private property to advance public health and safety, so as long as it does so in a reasonable and proportional manner. Finally, the power to regulate is expansive and stems from the state constitution. As the U.S. Supreme Court explained it, the liberty secured by the U.S. Constitution does not import an absolute right in each person to be wholly freed from restraint. On any other basis, organized society could not exist with safety to its members. The Massachusetts Constitution laid down as a fundamental social compact that the whole people's covenant with each citizen, and each citizen with the whole people, that all shall be governed by certain laws for the common good, and that the government is instituted for the protection, safety, prosperity, and happiness of the people, and not for profit, honor, or private interests of any one man. So that is our reply from town council. So just to repeat, our regulations apply to aquaculture farming wherever it takes place in the town of Duxbury.
And just, if I may respond to it quickly.
Sure.
You know, as I said in maybe I wasn't clear enough in my initial presentation, but, you know, what I'm not saying is that someone that has waterfront property in Duxbury can just, you know, stick out the cages on their property, and there's no town say in that whatsoever.
Okay, that's
There's gonna be a
I'm
review
glad to hear
process.
that. You said they were silent, but we're not silent. You
Well,
know
the
that.
regulations themselves, if you, comparatively to a town like Plymouth that addresses private property rights not correctly, but
That's right.
expressly, I think it would be beneficial for the board to look at something like that, because there are a lot of benefits to aquaculture, to bay health, to the economy, and if there are sites available that don't add to the burden that we've identified for them, it would make sense to seriously consider, you know, putting in a process to open up those sites. And then just on, you know, the real on-the-ground experience with working with CJ is he's applied and been told by, you know, Duxbury Bay Management, other people in town, that the moratorium doesn't apply to people, to waterfront property owners. They should be able to apply and be heard. And when you go and talk to the state, they're waiting on documentation from the town. So the town turns around, and you're sort of stuck in limbo just with the way things currently are, because they're not expressly addressed, and it's written in a lease, sort of, it's envisioned as a public land lease essentially through the
Okay,
regs.
Thank you very much. I think what we're not going to do is we're not going to litigate, you know, what's happening with CJ, with the state and the town and all of that.
No, I just wanted to give some anecdotal
And
experience.
that's actually, excuse me, the private property issues are not on our agenda. And so we're sort of veering off of what has been on our agenda. So it's this, you know, I appreciate Fernando's, you know, contribution, but I think that at this point, we just need to sort of move back to what was on our agenda, what's before us. The letters from you didn't come till, I didn't get it till 3 o'clock this afternoon or something like that, so I didn't have time to, you know, read and digest it and figure out, so,
One sent on the 20th as well, February 20th. Did you receive that one?
no.
Yes,
No.
they got that one on Friday.
Friday.
Oh, yeah, on Friday, so, anyhow, you know, I'd like to, you know, maybe it's an issue for the future. I mean, you know, we could certainly look at it, but we're not, I don't think tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Brian?
If I can just ask generally, so I think to cut to the chase, we're being asked to amend our regs.
Correct.
And go from a moratorium to what we're calling a limited entry fishery. And I'm just going to think out loud here a little bit, and you correct me as necessary.
Or someone else will if I can.
Yeah, so currently, if a holder of a license wants to sell, he or she can do that through a private transaction. They have to come here to get.
Not the license, so they could sell their business.
Okay.
And then that purchaser would have to apply to the town, meet the town's requirements for a license holder.
Yep.
Make their case to the town, and the town would then approve the transfer.
But they don't have to be on a wait list to do that,
No,
right?
that's a private
Okay,
transaction.
great. So if we approve the amendment and change to the limited entry fishery, that process is still the same?
Correct.
Okay, so tell me the difference if I'm a holder of a license, what is the difference to me between the current situation and the limited entry fishery, and what is the justification to moving to the limited entry fishery? I want to understand what practically we're changing.
I guess if the question is from the perspective of a present holder of a license, none. It's the changes from the perspective of the town. It's
Yes.
making a regulatory statement that the temporary nature that implies moratoria, we're beyond that. We're just going to say that the amount of agriculture we have in terms of number of licenses is set. Towns have, there are only so many liquor stores in the town. At some point, the town says, I joke with Fernando that Duxbury could probably support 50, but we don't have 50. At this point, saying, we've had this industry, 30 is what it's been, we're just going to hold it at 30, we're going to say limited entry fishery after this. I think there are only like 7 razor licenses or something like that. 50. And how many? 15. And people still have mussel licenses, even though they haven't harvested mussels commercially since 2006. But they're waiting,
They're optimistic.
yeah, for the comeback.
Yeah, so that's helpful, and thank you. And Madam Chair, I guess from my perspective, we've been at this at this meeting doing nothing for 18 years. I don't know that there's a rush to get to an amendment or a modification to the regulations right now with just some language that we're looking at. It appears that there may be some additional issues that are surrounding this as well, and I understand there are larger issues about the Bay in general. So I'm personally not comfortable modifying the regulations. I understand that not modifying the regulations will not harm the status quo, and that things can be transferred if, as, and when vacancies become available. But I think there's more to it that we need to get our arms around. And I'm not saying I wouldn't amend, but I'm not prepared to amend it tonight.
Right. Just for the discussion, I'm just trying to understand what other things, what other topics, or just maybe you can expand a bit. What will change your mind to go and look at it today? I'm just trying to understand what further information
So
you
the
need.
so
Is it what we're not comfortable with what Jeff Blake has written?
no. Well, did he write this?
Yes.
Okay.
He reviewed it and approved it.
All right. Well,
No, excuse me, I thought the Bay Management Commission authored.
No. I asked him to review the document.
Okay.
Paragraph
Okay.
8, section 8.
all right. So I think, frankly,
Yeah.
the draft language needs some work.
Okay, good.
It does.
So Amy raised a point of
Yep.
ambiguity. I understand that we can have disagreements as to what that means. Ideally, there shouldn't be any disagreement at all.
shouldn't be.
Because the language is clear.
Right.
So I think there can be some clarification. Also, I think there's some confusion in my mind anyway, or maybe some potential unfairness about a supposed wait list that people have to pay to be on under the new regulation, that when a new license becomes available, might be subject to a lottery. So what's the benefit of being number one in line on the wait list if the person who's last in line might win the lottery? So I'd like to get my arms around that as well.
You're
So-
about to.
That's an interesting
good.
question.
I can answer that.
Pick
It
up
does
on.
say in the regulations that those existing people on the waiting list would stay in their spot, and the lottery would be intended for anybody adding. So what you're saying is, the current method of applying for a license right now is not the way we would continue to move forward. You're saying that these are the spots that we're allowing for, and those are the only spots. So we're not asking people to fill out a new application and fill out, go out, find a site, get a survey, present a plan, and provide that plan. What you're basically doing is allowing people who currently want to be on the wait list the mechanism to get on without having to go through that process, if that makes sense.
So to get on the wait list, you have to go through a lottery.
Oh, the application process right now is there's a moratorium, but the town can accept applications, but you have to go out, find a site, fill out the application, find a site, a suitable site, provide documentation of how you would grant development, and then provide that to the town, and then that's the only way you could get on the wait list right now.
Do we have anybody sitting on with any
Yes.
pending applications?
Yeah, we have 3 right now.
Okay, and you have them in chronological order, essentially?
Correct, and right now they have to renew every year in January, because as the current regulations state, you have to renew in January.
So it sounds like we need to work on the language for the lottery, just to make it clear to all.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
At the podium.
Good evening, everyone. Peter Quigley, 32 Long Point Lane. I'm a new member of the Bay Management Commission, so this is a question that maybe the other members know. Is there a survey of Duxbury Bay, Duxbury property with all the town leases and any state leases related to green crabs, kelp, or any other commercial activity in the bay? Do we know?
So Bay Management did one of those. I'm currently working with the Division of Marine Fisheries, and before Chris left, we were working on trying to get those sites on the GIS mapping as a layer. I'm just working with the state to make sure that we have the correct sites, because some of them are done with a land survey as opposed to GPS, like a GPS coordinate, so it's a little bit hard to transfer. So we just want to make sure that they're all set, but eventually there will be something that's available to everybody.
Time frame involved, Jake, or, I mean, 6 months, 5 years?
Oh, I hope before the summer.
Before the summer?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
This would help in the conversation as to uses of the bay and
Yes,
and
it
where
would,
people
yeah.
should be.
So,
That'd
I
be
mean,
really
that's the
helpful.
thing, there's all
Yeah.
this commercial activity, and
Yeah.
the state is really encouraging more.
Yeah,
We should have a handle on what's out there beyond just what the town controls, so I think
Correct.
that would help all of us.
yeah, definitely. That's good to hear.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Drew Sullivan, 55 Odd Arc Road. I'm, I think, number 1 on the wait list.
How long
so
have you
I've
been there?
Since May.
Oh,
Oh, not
Yeah.
too long.
But
Hey.
I've been pursuing it for around 3 years out of various Freedom of Information Acts, because there's not much information and it's been in a moratorium. So I understand that we're going to limited entry fishery, and I'd hold my spot as number 1, but I'm just wondering why we wouldn't expand if it's less than 1% of the bay. It's also, I think 7 of maybe the larger farms just moved to the Battelle space, and more or less the mixed use case, the farms are static, where rowers, sailors, and such aren't. So it seems like a regulation issue. It doesn't really affect the amount of the fishery. And I'm just wondering, because the metrics seem to allow more space if we've already been sustaining it and we just moved the larger farms to an off-site, non-public area, why wouldn't we expand?
Sorry,
Joe or?
sorry, I'm, you're gonna have to
Yeah,
help me.
why are we limiting to 30 farms, 30 leases, when we could benefit from allowing people to not have to deal with transfers, and the public could apply and get on a wait list that gets an oyster farm?
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
One point I'd make is that if you, historically, when the Board of Selectmen imposed the moratorium, it essentially grandfathered applications before it made the change. So that's something that the board could consider. You know, because it's your regulations, but that was done the last time, in fairness to people who'd already been on a waiting list before they started a new waiting list.
Okay.
I'm a little confused about the question, because wouldn't we know if you're suggesting that some of the farmers have moved, but if we lease a particular area, wouldn't we know that
I think it was a reference, first of all, there are no large farmers. No one has more than the 3. And I think what he's referring to is Island Creek's acquisition of Battelle. And I think the suggestion was that that's pulled use of Mattakesett Court and other areas away from Mattakesett Court. Is that
That's correct.
what you're trying to say? Okay.
I meant workforces inside.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
sorry, sorry, I wasn't
Oh, so
following.
it's reduced the demand in Mattakesett Court, that's what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone who farms and delivers to Island Creek lands their oysters at Island Creek. They also use Mattakesett Court and the other places.
Well, and because I do think that is part of this bigger whole conversation, the use of the bay and the use of the waterfront. There's not a lot of public access to that waterfront, and it's problematic. You see, Washington Street just lined with cars and trailers on a July day. So, it really is part of a really bigger conversation.
Mike?
Well, we have Attorney Messina up there.
It's free advice, so
Yeah,
take it or leave it.
and I think it's, with something as important as this, I think it's, I respect that my board members wanting to feel comfortable with this kind of language. What processes did you and your commission go through to prepare this language? Did you use other towns? How was it developed?
So we started with other towns' regulations and sort of modeling them. But they weren't really a perfect fit, and they didn't necessarily employ the lottery, which this town does for wild shellfish permitting. So we tried to take that part from town regulations that have a limited entry fishery and marry it with our lottery function, so it would look as close as possible to the way we operate the lottery for the other licenses. There was an original draft that then went to town council that I wrote that I thought was superior. And but town council said this is better, and I thought before this committee would vote and say we wanted, the stamp from town council to say this is the best way to express it, which apparently is imperfect, and so we need to get that right.
I'm sort of with my other board members that I think that looking at this again is probably a good idea. And I think it'd be also a good idea to have that forum or some conversation about the uses of the bay. I can see how people who are, number one on the wait list might be a little bit anxious or, wondering whether they're ever going to get off of it. Is 30 the magic number, or is 32 I mean, I don't know. It's, is there a possibility of increasing it, or is it not? And we won't know that, and we'll never, but until we have some comprehensive discussion on all the different uses and, management issues in the bay, it's so hard.
No, that makes perfect. If I would say that is, so for example, individuals from DBMS are on the Bay Management Commission, individuals from the Yacht Club, and so all those constituencies are represented, and that's what gets discussed. So rowing, sailing, a lot of the mooring realignment was originally set because you have this wind against the tide phenomena that happens, where good luck trying to get through the mooring field. And so all those interests, so perhaps some community knowledge that is the forum that's always open to bring these complaints to, so that we don't have to take entire Board of Selectmen meetings to discuss that. We could do that before that group and have folks in the select board there as well, and just to hear what people have to say about it.
Yeah. No, sounds good. All right.
Just briefly,
Ryan?
I'd be very interested in hearing from some of the growers as to how the modification helps or hurts the existing activities out there, if anybody cares
Or
to speak to it.
If it does help or hurt,
If
maybe.
it helps or, I don't know how it affects them, so I'm curious to
I'm
get some
thinking if
opinions.
it hurt, they'd all be up at the microphone.
Yeah, I guess.
Does anybody have anything that they're concerned about with this potential change in language?
People with boots on?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Somebody.
Hello out there, yeah.
I am Joe Pierce of 517 Franklin Street. I'm a third generation grower, relatively new. I've been doing it forever, but new to having my own farm. I will say, I don't think everyone understands what it actually takes financially, like hard work, break your back, the whole nine. I guess part of the problem with this is these regulations have been looming for so long, and I know that the select board, thank you for having us and everything that you do. I know you guys have really wanted to push for us to come to the moratorium. It's not permanent, and it has become permanent, and here we are in front of you with a plan, happy to answer all your questions, everything that you have, and it just seems like it's just being pushed down the road again. I've been to meetings for almost 20 years now, going over the regulations, the original ones from 2017 when Jake became harbor master, and it just feels like every time any of us step in front of you, it's pushed down the road. There are more questions. There's more everything where it's just keep kicking the can down the road. I go to a lot of the bay management meetings. I go to all the shellfish advisory meetings. I'd be happy to have you guys come. I know Fernando's been to quite a few. The shellfish advisory meetings, I've never seen a select board person at one. Might be a good way to get some of the information. Thank
So
you.
you're in favor of the limited entry fish, us
I
adopting
am. As far as a farmer goes, I don't think the limited entry really changes all that much for us. Personally, maybe some of the other guys have different opinions on that, but I personally feel like it's just getting us to a solidified set of regulations. I'd also like to note we are the only regulated thing in the entire bay.
Well, we're hearing that with crabs and seaweed. Yeah,
Crabs is
got it.
absolutely nothing we can do, unfortunately. Seaweed, there's also absolutely nothing we can do. Rowers and sailors are not regulated. The marinas are not regulated. The regular Joe Schmo boat
Yes, not regular, yeah.
has $500,000 and wants to buy a 40-foot Grady White, they're not regulated. But we are heavily, heavily regulated.
Yeah.
And it is a large burden on the amount of regulations that we have on us.
And Madam-
Nicely said.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce.
Madam Chair, I'm speaking for myself. I am not looking to kick this issue down. I've been on the board actually a little bit longer than the rest of you, and this is the first conversation that we have been able to have
Right.
with both the Bay Management and the Shellfish Advisory. So this is the first time that we are hearing about the way that it works, about the history of the moratorium and what is being proposed. So I promise you that we are not trying to, just kick this down the road.
No, we're just trying to get, full information so we know, making as informed a decision as we can.
Would some of the select board come to the open meetings?
I don't know. We'll
I'm there.
I've seen you.
Right.
Yeah.
Dick Brennan, Shellfish Advisory Chair. I'm the chair of the committee, and I have a kind of a unique perspective because I see both sides of the issue. If the question is, what does the grant holder's license holder feel about the change from moratorium to a limited entry fishery? It doesn't affect them one way or the other. There's no effect whatsoever. All it does, it straightens out some of the language. It gets through the moratorium, puts some stronger language in there. As far as they're concerned, and these that I've talked to them, I see them a lot. We share coffee together. I'm not an advocacy. The Shellfish is not an advocacy group. We're an oversight group for you. And this is what I do, is I'm down there, I'm seeing these guys and ladies. There's going to be no effect on them whatsoever from for the change. It's more of a paper trail than it is anything else.
So if we put this off, the decision, for a couple of months, it's not going to affect their,
What, can I ask a question?
yes.
What is the question? Why aren't you saying yes?
I personally don't have any questions.
Well, some of the members had some question about the language of the agreement, that it was not clear enough. And we have people come before us that say, well, could there be more than 30?
I've been to both meetings, chair the Shellfish and the Bay Management. And they wrote something up. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just was a captive audience, so to speak. They had the town lawyer look at it. The town lawyer writes it out. And now I see that you have issues with the town lawyer itself. So that's really confusing for me, not being a lawyer. Maybe for lawyers in the room, it's the norm. I don't know. So I don't know if it's tossing the ball around, you're not comfortable with it. I'm not sure what it is. And everybody here thinks the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Hello, I'm Skip Bennett, 20 Seabury Point. Excuse me, I'm a first-generation farmer. My nephew got up and spoke about the coming to the board and not making a decision. Part of the reason we're here and the urgency for why we're here tonight is that your board has told us that you will not deal with any aquaculture regulations, including simple housekeeping issues like float permits. I also am on the Bay Management, and we have really felt a sense of urgency to get this before you. It may not be perfect, but if we're going to kick this down the road, can we please retract that idea that we won't deal with any aquaculture issues?
That was me that said that. Can I respond?
Yeah.
I'd like to respond to that because I was the one who said I would
Sure.
not. And that was not in any way meant to offend any of the growers in this room. That was my frustration with the Bay Management, and I'm just going to say it, the Bay Management Committee. I have asked since I became a member of this board almost 4 years ago to do exactly what they came in and did tonight, which was to give us the information that we need, that is necessary for us to make this kind of decision. Personally, speaking for myself, why am I not making this decision and going for the limited entry fishery is because the wording of this document, of no fault of anybody in this room, is not clear and precise, which is what I don't want it to be the biggest words and the most, legal, I want it to be clear and concise so that everybody can understand it moving forward. So that is the only reason.
I understand that and I appreciate that. I guess my concern is if this becomes a protracted effort of trying to get back here, that if there's a transfer or if there's a need for, float permits, that I'd just like some acknowledgement that we will actually now entertain those.
I would entertain
I
that because
appreciate
again, it was the informational session that I was looking for, not to have, and that has been given to us as of tonight.
We can,
So-
we can try to get this back on the agenda quickly.
Great. And then as a farmer, I would say that I'm completely indifferent to whether or not you expand the aquaculture. I guess for me, I was the first or the only one that's still going. There were people before me. I think for me, the struggle in when the moratorium came into effect, it was largely aquaculture was seen as too much. So at that point, there was a lot of concern about aquaculture. So if we entertain the idea of opening up more farms, more licensed sites, I'm all for it, but understand that the industry today, we don't want to take the heat of there being more farms down the road.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
I just was going to comment on the infrastructure. I've had a grant for, I don't know, over 20 years.
I'm sorry, can you give your name and
Henry
address?
McCarthy, 231 Bolus Road.
Thank you.
And I have ran my business out of Plymouth now for 15 or so years. And before that, I went out of Howlands to avoid having to go to Massachusetts. And that was umpteen years ago before it got to what it is now out there, which is on a Saturday, if anyone's out there knows, it's crazy. I never thought I'd wish for the winter, but my brother and I often pray for winter to come. Thank you. It's just, there's no room down there. That's why I go out of Plymouth.
Luckily, winter isn't what it used to be.
Really. Anybody else? All right, so what's the pleasure here?
I think first we do need to show a commitment to our industry here that we're not holding up any of their work with the suggestion we're going to tie up requests for permits and things like that. But I also absolutely support what two board members here. They want to tweak some language, talk with council again. If they could bring that back to us in a couple of weeks, for a vote, I think that would suffice. It doesn't, I think in principle, I support this. That's what I was trying to say, is
Yeah.
that.
Can I volunteer as the liaison to the Duxbury Bay Commission, that I engage with Mr. Blake and have him to relook at the language and
Yeah.
send it to the boards?
Make sure
to the
that the
board.
concerns they have
Yeah.
with commas
Do
and
you mind if I do the
semicolons.
same? Because I want to check the correspondence on that, because I had spoken with Amy, and I saw a couple contextual errors. By the way, if anybody needs a date, we can go with April 8th. I can get it back here.
April 8th.
April 8th is good.
April
Can we broaden and have the same, can we broaden this to also allow for people to come in and share concerns about the bay? I mean, I don't want to, I don't think it's going to change my
Would be the
mind.
commission that you've got designed just for that.
Yeah.
That's the
Right,
function of
okay.
them.
State of the
Okay,
Bay
that's
idea.
fine.
I'd like to see
Between
the
now
big
and
idea
then.
too, but not in a select board
But the
meeting.
thing is,
for starters.
again, I'm just trying to, competing use of the bay, Amy, implies that there's too many oyster fishermen, therefore we have to
No.
reduce the number of licenses. No, what, again, I'm just trying to figure out, what is it about this regulation that we need more conversation? I understand
Yeah.
that we need conversation about language, but the forum is, by sounds of it, based on what I've heard this evening, is about getting people together to talk about, to understand, and maybe resolve potential areas of conflict, all right? I think we can do that. I mean, I think I've heard Joe kind of volunteering maybe to start that kind of those forums to get people together to talk.
Yeah.
But the focus is on this regulation, and what do we need to go from a moratorium to a limited entry? And then right now, it seems to be that with the languages, we need to sharpen up the language.
think that's
make-
all it
make
is.
clear. Is that all?
I think it's all it is.
Is that?
That is
That-
fair. That
okay.
is fair. I am just, again, as
Yeah.
committed as I am to the oyster growers in town, I'm also, committed to giving a voice to those
Right.
other people that have shared their
Totally agree.
concerns. So I just want to make sure that we hear everybody. But again, I don't have a problem with this regulation and calling it the limited entry fishery, and I'm ready to do that tonight, honestly, except for the fact that we just need
The language.
some language tightened up so we can
So
reschedule.
could we meet then on April 8th if we get the
Sure.
language?
Absolutely.
Is that okay? I'll work, I'll check with Renee.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
it's
said
easy.
April 8th, that's
It's-
good.
It's simple fixes,
Simple.
it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't take from,
I actually sat with Jake and Al Hoban back in 2017, and we put this whole thing together. So I'm the guy to blame, if you're looking for blame, on the original document, not the new one, but the original one. But no, I'm pretty fluent with it, and so is Jake, so we can hammer it out pretty easily.
Yeah.
We're due to come back on water quality, which we didn't cover tonight, but there's some developments on that the commission wants to bring forward, so.
Oh, good.
That's really
Would you be
cool.
ready on April 7th for that conversation? 'Cause
April
8th.
Oh, the April 8th, because some of the folks here
Well, I
may
don't
be
know, do
very
there may not
interested
be-
in that.
Peter Quigley's kind of spearheading that.
Let's see.
There may
he's
not be
saying yes.
time on April 8th, is there? Or-
No, we'll be okay. We can get one more thing in there.
Okay.
That would be,
I
I
think
think that would,
We'll have to
the
check on that one.
conversations would be great.
Yeah, this should be quick, right?
This will be
why-
easy,
But
yeah.
the water quality issue, maybe it would be a longer,
It will be.
Yeah, that'll be a long one.
and I don't know what else is on the agenda.
We'll leave that one on hold, but we'll get the moratorium back in here right away.
All right,
Yeah, the 8th might not work for the other one.
okay. So probably not Mr. Quigley to the water quality on the 8th. We'll probably do that a little bit later.
Yeah, that gets scheduled through our office. We'll be happy to handle it. Just let us know.
He's off the hook for a little bit. All right, I think we've come to a
Yeah.
consensus about this. I don't think we need to put it to any sort of a
Nope,
No.
April
vote,
8th.
right? So we'll see you back, and you all don't all have to come. You can, you're welcome
And watch on
to.
the,
Just want to thank Joe
You know,
and the Duxbury Bay Commission and the Shellfish Advisory Committee, so
Yes.
for your work in getting us here, and we'll get the last hurdle done, and April 8th, we'll get together, so.
we'll get together. I
Sa-
think we're all in favor. We just need to, tighten up the language.
Thank you all very much, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks for coming in.
righty then. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Joe, wherever you are. I saw
I know.
Joe in there.
Joe's at the
Snuck
back.
right out.
I know, he didn't get up to talk. All right, so, when they go, oh, I'm so tired. Let's see. No, it's all right. Oh,
But the thing is, you had the questions answered.
No,
yes, I think it was good.
years for this.
I think the only thing that we need to come back still and answer that young man's question about why he's number one on the wait list. We'll probably never get off.
Somebody's
But-
always gonna be,
but-
there's gotta be a cap somewhere. If you move,
Exactly, but if we have that state of the bay, uses of the bay conversation, then that will,
We can do the limited entry.
Because we,
Thank you for taking my advice.
I was saying that the forums that we might have with the Duxbury Bay Management Commission regarding the uses of the bay and stuff will help inform us as to the cap of 30 people,
Yeah.
30 farms.
So the limited entry the limited entry exists. What we're talking about, that's a different conversation
It's a
about the
different
number
conversation.
of licenses within the limited entry fishery.
Right. And it may be exactly what it is, 30. But, yes, a different conversation. We need to
Yes.
get this done, first.
April 8th.
Yeah. All right, Rainey,
Yes, ma'am.
it's your turn.
Thank you. A couple of updates for you before actually, Brian's passing out the list for the long range so you can see it. Obviously, I don't have the shellfish thing on the 8th, but I'll add it to the bigger one later. My first update is regarding Article 14, the PFAS prioritization plan update. On Friday, I let the PFAS working group and town council, I let the PFAS working group know that town council confirmed my understanding of the procurement process related to Article 14, which that under Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, exempts contracts with architects, engineers, and related professionals from bidding. Thus, no competitive bid process is required, and the town can contract with a firm of its choosing. Further, with regard to the question on the timing of when funding will be available, Finance Director Mary McKinnon notified me that Article 14 may proceed at this time, and we do not need to wait until July 1st, since this article is being funded by way of certified funds on hand, and I thank Mary for that information. And the PFAS working group will be refining the scope of services with the engineer, including the proposed timeline, prior to my signing the contract for his services. So basically, they're off to the races.
Who is the PFAS working group, Rainey?
It's you and Tanya
It's
Trevison's.
a Water Advisory Board with
Is that what it is?
myself. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Water Advisory Board with myself, Jim Begley,
Candace?
Candace Martin, Ryan Trahan.
Great.
Yeah.
Yep.
With regard to the Duxbury seawall, the Duxbury seawall grant application. Last week, because of the work performed by Candace Martin, the town will be able to submit a grant application request in the amount of $3 million to the state's Dam and Seawall Grant Program for Phase 2 of the Duxbury Beach Seawall Construction Project. Excuse me. For your re-edification, Phase 2 is a $20 million project overall. I want to thank Candace and Pat Brennan, who also played a supporting role, for their efforts in this endeavor, and to let Candace know that I and the town greatly appreciate her assistance.
Phase 2 is what?
The rest of it,
The construction?
What was approved?
So.
it's what we approved
yeah.
2 years ago, or a year ago.
Yeah. So, and that's a $20 million project?
Yes,
what are we talking about? I'm sorry.
the seawall.
Phase 2 of the seawall, the
Seawall, okay.
construction and
Yep.
whatnot, so.
And finally, no, not finally, but something Brian had mentioned earlier, the Plymouth County Cybersecurity Program. Last week, a number of South Shore communities were invited by the Plymouth County Commissioners and the Plymouth County Treasurer to a meeting during which they announced the Plymouth County Cybersecurity Program. This program was created by CyberTrust Massachusetts in conjunction and collaboration with Bridgewater State University to offer vital cybersecurity assessments and endpoint data monitoring to the Plymouth County municipalities. The program is in its infancy. It's only about a year old, and they have trained 24 municipal employees so far, including staff from our own IT department, who have been attending the associated coursework that began last spring, and we're sending another IT staff member there next week. The program provides training for IT staff on important networking concepts, security measures, threat assessment, monitoring, and troubleshooting techniques necessary for deploying and maintaining networks effectively. The cyber range is essentially a theater that will accommodate approximately 40 people using dual screens and allows for the gamification of cyber attacks. Basically, it's a red team versus blue team, and one attacks and the other tries to defend. It's currently considered the most state-of-the-art range in the country. And finally, Select Board goals. At your next meeting on March 25th, there will be a discussion on the setting of Select Board goals for the coming year. I would kindly ask that each of you come to that meeting, please, with some prepared goals in hand for the board to consider. There you go.
All right.
Do we,
I had a question, but I've lost it. What?
just for, do we need to submit this for open meeting law? Do we need to submit those beforehand, or can we bring them
can't
live?
Bring them right to the meeting.
We can bring them to the meeting, can we?
Yeah.
Bring it
You
up.
don't circulate them
Because
among
it'll be on
us,
the agenda that
but
we're talking about.
If you want to send them to Rainey,
Yeah.
Yeah.
knock yourself.
Okay, I can send them to Rainey, can I?
Yes,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay.
Just can't, we can't.
Yeah, no,
circulate it.
exactly
Yeah,
right.
if you want to do
yeah.
that, you can send them to me directly, and don't copy anybody else, and I'll put
Okay,
them on the
yeah,
agenda.
yeah.
Or you can just bring them to the
Oh,
meeting.
just bring them to the meeting
whatever
itself.
you prefer.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Amy?
Did you remember what you wanted to say?
No,
There's
I haven't
several,
been thinking about it again.
not that our list isn't long enough, and we might have to change the font to keep it all on one page, but there are several things.
I did that, actually.
To be, I have,
It's a double
I
And the
see
margins.
that, Rainey.
And the margins.
I think I have another idea.
So a couple of things that aren't on here, or that I'm not seeing, maybe they are. There's a lot of things on here. I would, the DPW updates. Something I saw recently made me wonder, was it a town meeting?
Yeah, town meeting, yeah.
The footprint, the building size has been further reduced down. If we could get some updates
I'll
on
get you an
the
update on the DPW, sure.
maybe periodic updates as we go on, because I feel like I'm kind of losing
Sure.
sight of that.
Where are you seeing that? It's just not on.
She's
here?
not.
It's not
That's
on
what
there,
she's
that's why
saying.
I'm
She's not
asking.
seeing it, so I'll get
The
you
other
one.
thing that I had asked a while ago,
have two
Rini,
more.
oh, you have two more?
Two more.
I'm so sorry.
I've got one if Amy doesn't bring it up.
The beach, getting the strategizing, discussing, and figuring out how to get the the town of Plymouth to
Yeah, that was mentioned at town
compensate.
meeting, and the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at the historical last 5 years, the recorded data we have from police and fire on the number of runs that we do out there, because that's what's going to
That's
drive
good
it,
leverage. There's some leverage there, but.
if the
we-
numbers are correct.
I think if we could all be thinking about it too. I mean, there's.
Yeah.
Rob's
There's
already
gotta
given me
be a
his,
way,
the fire
so
chief's already
let's
given me
figure it
his
out.
data, and the police chief's getting his now.
And then the other thing that I know, and maybe this is just something that you're doing and but the task force that you're going
Yep,
to appoint.
that is something I'm doing. Yep.
If we have some input on membership to that,
Yeah, it would be
think at least
there most likely
two
will be
members of the select
one or
board.
two members from the board, but I'm
Yes.
still putting that together.
Yeah, that'd be really good to have a couple of members of the board on that.
all right, just wondering about that. Thank you.
Yep.
Those are the three that I'm hoping to get on
You had
the
something?
list.
No, Amy, you
Oh,
covered it.
The other thing
task
I asked
force.
a while ago is to get an update on the opioid settlement.
Was
and
that
where
in
we
the
are.
paper? Was
What?
there something in the paper, the newspaper last week about that?
In the Clipper?
In the Clipper, I thought. I saw an article.
There was something in the Globe or something, maybe a month or so ago now, about many towns that had not been using their monies. And I just was
I know
wanting
we
to know
have.
where we are.
I'll find out.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Jeff Chandler.
Jeff Chandler, Franklin Street. This is a residential question. Renee mentioned the PFAS thing, and I know you're involved in it. Are we doing any testing for PFAS in the bay? This is going to go to the water quality thing, which I'm trying to get some traction on too, but, all this stuff flows downhill. Granted, it's a huge body of water, and it's in the groundwater, but do we know if we're going to do any testing in the bay for that?
We're only testing drinking water.
Okay. I didn't know if
We,
I don't know how it's going to affect, if
No,
it's going to affect the
and-
bay or not. I'm just-
No.
It is drinking water.
yeah, I do remember, I know this isn't on the agenda tonight, but I would call your attention, there was a meeting, maybe Rainey or somebody could, maybe I'm volunteering myself, where we learned about plumes. And that included the mouth of, like right around the bluefish.
you
Yeah,
know,
So
the plumes, yeah, they did a
So
simulation.
to answer your question,
Yeah.
there was some aspect of the
We'll
plume.
talk about it, the water quality
Groundwater
meetings down the
flow.
road. I didn't know if it's already being done or something.
Yeah,
It was
we-
at a previous meeting, we had a discussion about the plumes and the
that's it, thank
groundwater
you.
flow.
Yeah, and we can certainly talk more about that with the Bay Management when we're talking about water quality.
I guess my question there would be to what end?
I
You
don't-
know, let's say
I don't-
you have PFAS in the bay, we can't be, I mean, we'll have to open up more oyster beds to filter the PFAS out of the.
No, and then the PFAS gets concentrated in the oysters and then,
Oh, there
don't
it is.
know,
So,
don't
yeah,
go there.
You don't know that.
No, don't go
You
there.
don't know.
Jesus.
I
You
don't
don't
know.
know that.
No.
I've just,
That's a man fact. You're just like, no, you don't know that. We're not spreading that around.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good seeing
well,
you.
that's how they
Thanks
that's
for
how
your
they
help.
make
No,
nitrogen.
she says no, and that's it.
Just too quick.
Stop your
too
man
quick,
facts.
Too quick.
All right, well,
Oh, God.
I have nothing else.
Oh, thank you, sorry. All right, one-day liquor license request. We have one of them from Law Mom LLC. Where's that, though? Where is it?
Let me just jump in.
Yeah, just jump
I
in.
move that Ms. Samantha Allen, as a representative of Law Mom LLC, is granted a one-day wine and malt license for the Wealth Protection 101 seminar on Wednesday, March 27th, 2024, from 6:30 PM to 8 PM at Law Mom, 5 Chestnut Street, Duxbury, contingent upon the conditions of the license.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
then we have some minutes. We have open session minutes from February 5th, February 15th, and March 9th.
I move, you want
yeah,
them one at
just,
a time, or all
um,
together?
Move
One-
them one at a time, please.
Okay, I move to approve the 2/5/24 Select Board open session minutes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the 2/15/24 Select Board open session minutes as presented.
Second.
No discussion?
Nope, looks
Oh.
good.
Mr. McGee and Ms. McNabb have to abstain, so on the rest of us, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
And the next one?
I move to approve the 3/9/24 Select Board open session minutes as presented.
Second.
No discussion?
I was tempted on this one, but no.
Oh,
You
come on,
can.
Brian, come on.
You've been
I'm a
kinda
little-
quiet,
I'm a little
Brian.
disappointed, Brian.
Come on, do it.
They're all well-written. Looks good to me.
Okay,
All
all in
right.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, awesome. Announcements, Mrs. McNabb.
3/18/24 announcements. The 2024 Beach and Transfer Station stickers. The new 2024 Beach and Transfer Station stickers, effective April 1st, 24 through March 31st, 25, are available to purchase. Stickers can be purchased online by visiting www.town.duxbury.ma.us and clicking the link to purchase under the Services tab on the homepage by calling City Hall's, by calling City Hall Systems at 508-381-5455, or by mailing in or dropping off an application and supporting documents to the Stickers Department, Duxbury Town Hall, 878 Tremont Street, Duxbury. Applications are available on the town website and inside the lobby of Town Hall for your convenience. The annual town election will be held Saturday, March 23rd at the Lieutenant Timothy Steele Building at 130 St. George Street. Polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Vote by mail ballots may be turned into the town clerk drop box behind Town Hall or at the town clerk's office. The 2024 dog licenses are available. Reminder, all dogs over the age of 6 months must be licensed annually. There will be a late fee in the amount of $25 assessed for each unlicensed dog as of April 1st. The Duxbury Beach Spring Sweep 2024. The Duxbury Beach Reservation is conducting their annual beach cleanup on Saturday, March 23rd, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Registered online at www.duxburybeachreservation.org/volunteer. The next scheduled Select Board's meeting will be on Monday, March 25th, 2024, at 7 PM.
Yeah.
Oh. Did I mention the public meeting for the
Tomorrow night.
Marshfield and Duxbury
Tomorrow
Beach
at the Senior
Nourishment
Center.
Project update? On March 19th, 2024, at 6:30 PM, the towns of Marshfield and Duxbury request that you join them to hear from Woods Hole Group on the Marshfield and Duxbury Beach Nourishment Project constructed this winter. This is being held at the Duxbury Senior Center in the Ellison Room at 10 Mayflower Street in Duxbury, or you can join virtually.
Do you think this is going to be recorded?
I think so. Yeah, meeting recording after
It'll
the
be on
meeting will
PAC
be
TV,
available
yes.
Oh,
on
good,
Duxbury
okay,
PAC
because
TV.
I'm not
It
able to
will
go.
be a lightning rod.
Really?
Yes. The reason is they're going to impose the same, Mass Audubon is going to talk about imposing the same kind of bird regulations here that they do at Duxbury Beach.
Thought they're
So you
doing-
will hear from these people.
Wait.
I
You
thought
are,
they
you
were
do
just doing
yourself a favor by
monitoring.
going to this or watching it virtually.
But, so I'm getting confused. This is about.
In front of the seawall, they're going to put, the concept is to put what do they call it? Not
Clover
sacrificial.
restrictions?
Yes,
I thought they were just putting beach monitors.
that too. They're going to talk
mean,
about
'cause
all
of-
of it.
They've never had
It'll-
plovers
there's-
down there before.
There's,
Don't the plovers
it's
have
to
to
be
come
determined.
first?
It's to be determined.
Is to be determined.
Yep.
Okay, I just
And that's
wanted
what the
to
meeting's going to be about.
mention, because it wasn't on our original,
Leslie Fields will be heading the conversation.
So
I'm sorry.
I'm getting really confused. So this is beach nourishment,
Yes,
and beach nourishment now requires Mass Audubon going to do beach nourishment?
it was a condition of the it was a condition of the
The
permit.
condition of the permit, right?
Yes.
So what happened before is that there was never any beach for the plovers to nest upon.
Right.
And now that they're putting sand on it,
It's-
there's a whole lot of, in
Beach.
theory, beach for them to nest on. So
Man.
Mass Audubon got involved. Anyhow, I wanted to mention, because it wasn't on our original schedule, that we will be meeting on April 1st.
Yes.
Does everybody know that?
Are you joking?
No.
Ha ha, no.
Yeah, we will be.
And the other thing I want to say is about dog licenses, if you're over 70, you don't have to pay for them.
The dog or the license?
I'll be on a flight to Paris April the 1st.
I guess- So you will not be here April 1st?
You
Sorry,
poor
is that-
thing.
Am I mansplaining again?
I'll be sore.
I'm so sorry that you're going to Paris.
So we're meeting April 1st, April 8th.
Yep,
It will be for
And the-
April 8th.
not the 15th because it's a
Holiday,
Holiday.
Patriots Day.
I'm doing the candidate forum tomorrow night, too, at the library for the planning board.
There's, how
so
many
that'll
people,
be-
how many people will be there?
There's six.
Six candidates, right?
Six candidates. I think that only 4 are able to attend
Attend,
the
okay.
forum, but it's a good turnout. It's good to have a contested race.
Yep, have fun.
I think the school
senior-
committee debate is tomorrow night, too, right?
No, I don't know.
The senior
That's
center,
already,
No.
Already happened
already
last
happened.
week.
Yeah, last
senior
week.
center is hosting a candidates forum at 9 tomorrow.
Yes,
They are.
yes.
Yes.
I will be there.
9
Me
a.m.,
too.
right?
And Cindy will be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And our unknown,
We'll be fighting
I'll move-
against none of the above.
none of the above.
I'll move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, that's a good idea.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.